Entitled father demanded I pay for the house he bought for his stepdaughter. This will be long. A few years ago, I posted about how my father cheated on my mother and how I retaliated to him financially and socially. This will serve as somewhat of an update, as there have been developments ever since. For those who go back and read that post, I have some good news. About 5 months after I posted my story, my cousin reached out. He had been fired from his job, but he had met a wonderful girl that really changed his perspective. Growing up, he's an only child, and his parents were rich enough he didn't need to care about school. While I and my sister thrived academically, he made no effort to even try to graduate from high school, as being a legacy meant that he would always have a place in the local plant, the one that's big enough to support our entire town. That was until he found out how his family was struggling financially. His mom had spent all their savings to keep an unnecessary lavish lifestyle, and the local plant, after 3 decades, decided to stop hiring people without a degree or a trade, certificate, legacy or not. My cousin was working as a bus operator at that time, but got let go and couldn't find a job, and that's when this girl changed his life. She pointed out how helplessly he was, being a golden child not having to do anything growing up, and he listened to her. He reached out trying to make amends, and I and my sister accepted it. He went back to community college, got a degree, and started working at the plant last August. That's one relationship saved. At his wedding, my aunt also wanted to make amends. She had a falling out with my father, and perhaps her son had talked some senses into her, so she reached out and wanted to talk. Now, we're much more reserved about this one because we knew her antics so well, but she was quite genuine and understanding when we said we couldn't let her back into the grace as easily as her son. We went LC for a while. She's made efforts to be friendly to my niece and nephew, and never showed signs of any malicious intents. We're very much still keeping her on a short leash, but I want to believe that people can change, and so far she has not given me any reason to think otherwise. That's 2. The third is my grandmother. She's 85 this April. Among the grandchildren, I am the closest to her, so it pained me to have to go LC with her since our last interaction. She had also had a falling with my father because he was trying to get her to sign over her estate, maybe a story for another time. But she was having none of it, so they fought, and in the end, he went AWOL. They did not see each other for a year, until he showed up at my cousin's wedding. At said wedding, my father made an effort of avoiding me and my sister, but approached my BIL to brag that he had bought a house that he and his mistress were living in. We did not think much of it at first because his pension is hefty. To those who read my previous post, even though it went down by 40%, it's still almost as much as double that of my aunt, so he can very much afford such a commodity. But then, after we're on talking terms, my aunt let it slip that he had to take a loan to pay for that. But his name is not in the deed. It's the oldest son of the mistress instead. At this point, we figured that he's being scammed. But yeah, not our problem. Because of a series of incidents at my job, I was offered a much more secure and high-paying position. I will admit that this is truly an opportunity I thought I'd never have for at least another 3 years, but perhaps one can only have so much tragedies. With the raised salary, my mom's money from the divorce, and my sister help, I was able to put down a payment for a house for me and my mother, even though the housing market in my city was as crazy as ever. Even though I'm now eyeballs deep in debt. I'm proud of myself for having a house to my name. My father didn't contribute anything, and frankly, I didn't want to take anything, even if he had asked. Around late November of last year, my childhood friend, with whom my cousin and I are very close, died from a car accident. It was very sudden. My cousin called me at 2 in the night, and before I knew it, I was home for his funeral. Needless to say, I was in a bad mental place in the days leading up to and following his funeral. So I decided to move back home until after Lunar New Year, which is 2 weeks away, to take care of my grandmother. But I was also hoping a change of scenery would do me some good. My mother stayed to look after the kids. My sister's house is literally within walking distance from mine, so she'll be fine. 7 days after said funeral, my father showed up at my doorstep. I was very much still grieving, so I was in no mood to play games. I shut down any effort at pleasantries and just stared at him while he mumbles about traveling or some shit. Then, he told me that his mistress's second child, a girl, is attending college in my city next summer, and suggested we meet and be friends. I just laughed and told him to fuck off. That's when he brought up the house. Apparently, the precious little Stepdaughter doesn't want to stay in a college housing campus, nor does she want to share an apartment with friends or other renters. She wants a whole house for herself, in the middle of the worst housing economy in our country's history. Of course, having taken a loan for the house he bought for his stepson, he could never afford buying a house in the capital city where prices go up by the hours. In an attempt to please his mistress, he came to me, asking for money. I kid you not. This man literally dropped my sister off in a foreign city and told her to fend for herself when she went to college the first time, and now he wanted to bend over backwards for a child that isn't even his, while asking for money from his son, who he loudly claimed that he'd rather see dead. I truly can't comprehend the gears in his head. Little did he know, he poked me at the worst moment possible. I was still grieving a lost friend. I ripped him a new one, detailing things I didn't even know where it came from. I was mentally checked out when my mouth did the work, and towards the end I cracked my voice a little. He tried to argue a bit, but after my aunt and cousin showed up, they live nearby, he bolted. That was last month and I haven't heard from him since. Not that I care anyway. Work is busy and I have Lunar New Year to prepare. I'll admit that encounter didn't do me any good. It stings, TBH, having your father prioritize a child that's not even his over his son and daughter. I've had sleepless nights over it, trying to think of a good reason, maybe something we did or something in his life that was so unsatisfying that he had to seek it elsewhere, and not within his own family. I've come to accept that even though I always say I'm over it, deep down I'm still hoping for a reunion, hoping that one day he will come to his senses and try to make amends. It's a long shot, but I hope for such a day. I'm not letting my guard down for 1 second. If anything, I'm more vindictive than ever, but I have hopes.